He leaned in, a smug, condescending smirk on his face, and uttered the 7 words that would burn in my memory for 5 long years. You don't have to like it, you just have to pay it. He thought he had all the power. He thought he'd squeezed every last dime out of the young, naive couple in his overpriced apartment. What he didn't know was that in the world of software, we have a saying, what goes around comes around. Eventually, and his turn was coming. If you know the exquisite taste of seeing a bully get exactly what they deserve, then you're in the right place. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up, because you are about to witness a story where karma isn't just a concept, it's a meticulously executed plan. Let's dive into how a greedy landlord's $120 power trip cost him a $20,000 payday. The story begins in the late 90s. The world was buzzing with the promise of the dot-com boom, and my wife and I were just starting out. We were young, newly married, and filled with that specific brand of optimism you only have when your whole life is ahead of you. Our plan was simple, almost a cliche of youthful ambition. We'd live the dink life, double income, no kids. We figured a few years of frugal living would be our ticket to the quintessential American dream, a down payment on a house of our own. I had just graduated and was a freshly minted software developer, riding the wave of the tech bubble. My first job was a good entry point, but then came the call that changed everything. A recruiter from another city with an offer that felt like winning the lottery. They were offering me 3 times my current salary. I ran the numbers over and over, trying to find a catch. There wasn't one. It was a no-brainer. By living entirely on my wife's modest income and banking every single cent of my $75,000 salary, we could have a 20% down payment for a house in just 1 year. It felt like we'd found a cheat code for life. So, we packed up our lives and moved. We found a 2-bedroom condo for rent in the new city for $950 a month. It was an investment property owned by a real estate agent. We'll call Hank Wazowski. Now, let me paint a picture of Hank. He was a man made of beige, thin, with graying hair, and an aura of perpetual low-grade annoyance. He moved with a stiff, perfunctory energy, as if smiling might crack his face. There was no warmth, no humor, just business. During the initial walkthrough, he made a bizarrely specific point of telling us that the garbage disposal was explicitly not his problem. He repeated it, emphasizing that if it broke, we were on our own. It was a strange, oddly adversarial way to begin a landlord-tenant relationship, but we were too excited about our future to see it as the red flag it was. He seemed to look at us with a kind of detached amusement. We were so obviously young, so green, a pair of clueless newlyweds playing house, but I could see the gears turning in his head. We were a safe bet. 2 incomes, no kids, clean-cut, responsible. We were the perfect tenants to pay his mortgage for him. The trouble began when we filled out the rental application. Hank's eyes fixated on my details. Software developer, he read aloud, his voice flat. Then he saw the income, 7. He looked up at me, his expression shifting from disinterest to a strange mix of disbelief. And was that resentment? In the late 90s, for a 23-year-old kid in his second year out of college, that was an astronomical sum. Combined with my wife's salary, we were clearing 6 figures, yet renting an apartment that was, by all accounts, far beneath our means. I can't believe how much money you make, Hank muttered. Not really to me, but to himself, he said it again. A little louder this time, shaking his head. I felt a prickle of discomfort. I tried to explain our strategy, the 1-year plan to save for a house. We'll probably only be here for the year, I said, trying to be transparent. We might need to go month to month for a couple of months after the lease is up, while we close on a house. Would that be okay? Oh, that's fine, he said, waving a dismissive hand. The assurance felt hollow, but what could I do? We needed a place to live. We signed the lease. Over the next year, we were model tenants. We paid our rent on time. We were quiet, and we kept the place immaculate. We only saw Hank once during that entire year, when he stopped by for a minor repair, and again came the comment, tinged with that same weird envy. Still can't believe what they're paying you software guys. I just mumbled a vague reply, eager for the interaction to be over. His fixation on my salary was deeply unsettling. It felt like he wasn't just our landlord, he was our financial auditor, and he'd found something he didn't like. A year flew by. Our plan had worked perfectly. We'd saved a hefty sum, found a house we loved, and had a closing date on the calendar. The only snag was the timing. The new house wouldn't be ready for another 2 months after our lease expired. No problem, I thought. We had an agreement. I called Hank, confident this would be a simple conversation. Hey Hank, it's Rocky Moose. Just calling to let you know, we'll be taking you up on that month-to-month offer for 2 extra months. On the phone, he was perfectly agreeable. Not a problem at all, Rocky Moose, he said smoothly. I'll send over the extension paperwork for you to sign. A week later, the envelope arrived. I tore it open, ready to sign and get on with my life, but my eyes snagged on one number. My blood ran cold. The rent. He hadn't just extended the lease, he'd increased the rent by $500, from $950 to $1,450 a month. A more than 50% increase. My hands were shaking as I dialed his number. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a hot, tight feeling in my chest. This couldn't be right. It had to be a mistake. Hank, I said, my voice tight. I got the extension. There's a $500 rent increase. Why is it going up by over 50%? That's more than my new mortgage is going to be. And then, the real Hank Wazowski showed himself. The thin veneer of professionalism vanished, replaced by a cold, condescending tone that dripped with satisfaction. Rocky Moose, he said, drawing out my name as if speaking to a child. It's what the apartment goes for now. It's market rate. I would be losing money by renting it to you for less. Losing money? The lie was so blatant, so insulting. It took my breath away. I tried to reason with him. I reminded him of our conversation a year ago, of his verbal assurance. It was like talking to a brick wall. It became painfully clear what was happening. He knew we were in a bind. He knew we were closing on a house and had no other options. And most of all, he knew we could afford it. He remembered my salary, and he was going to get his piece of it. I argued. I pleaded. I pointed out the sheer unfairness of it all. He finally cut me off, his voice sharp and angry now that I was challenging his power play. And that's when he delivered the line. The line that would echo in my mind for years. You don't have to like it, Rocky Moose. You just have to pay it. Click. He hung up. I stood there, phone in hand, seething with a kind of impotent rage I had never experienced before. It wasn't just about the money. It was the injustice. The feeling of being utterly powerless, of being openly extorted by someone who was enjoying it. My wife and I spent the next few days frantically trying to find a way out. We looked into storage units. We considered crashing with friends, but the logistics were a nightmare. We were trapped. With a heart full of resentment, I swallowed my pride and wrote the check for $150. The next month, I wrote another one. Each stroke of the pen felt like a small defeat. He had won. When we finally moved out, I made sure that apartment was pristine. We scrubbed it from top to bottom, leaving it cleaner than when we'd arrived. It didn't matter. Hank still withheld $300 from our security deposit for a list of completely fabricated cleaning fees. Another petty final squeeze to get a few more dollars from the kids who made too much money. In total, he had screwed us out of $130 dinars. But the real cost was the bitterness that lingered. To add insult to injury, I saw his ad in the local paper a week after we moved out. He'd listed the apartment for just $1,100, not the $140 the market rate he'd claimed, but only $150 more than our original rent. A month later, the price was down to $125. He had lied, he had squeezed us, and he had done it for pure, spiteful greed. There was nothing I could do. The world moved on, and my anger simmered, a forgotten ember buried deep inside me. Fast forward 5 years. Life was good. The dot-com bubble had burst, but I'd survived the layoffs, and was now a senior developer. My wife and I had our house, a beautiful baby, and the memory of Hank Wazowski had faded into a bad anecdote I'd occasionally tell. Then, one Tuesday afternoon at the office, I overheard a conversation that made the world stop. One of my coworkers, a senior developer named Phil, was talking to the receptionist. "Hey, Mike," Phil said, "I'm expecting someone named Hank Wazowski to drop off some paperwork. Can you let me know when he gets here?" The name hit me like a physical blow. Hank Wazowski. A sour metallic taste filled my mouth. It couldn't be. It was an unusual name, but it had to be a coincidence. I walked over to Phil, my heart starting to pound in my chest. "Phil," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. "That name, Hank Wazowski. How do you know him?" "Oh, Hank?" Phil said, turning to me. "He's my real estate agent. He helped me buy my condo a few years back. Now I'm selling it to buy a bigger house, so I'm using him again." "Why? Do you know him?" My mind was racing. "What does he look like?" I asked. As Phil described the thin, gray, humorless man, a cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. It was him. And just as Phil finished his description, the front door to our office swung open, and in walked Hank Wazowski. He looked exactly the same, maybe a few more lines around his eyes, but carrying the same folder, the same dry, transactional air. He didn't recognize me at all. I was just another face in an office. He and Phil shook hands and started talking business. I just stood there, silent, a ghost from his past. The anger I thought I had buried came roaring back to life, fresh and hot, and in that moment, an idea began to form. A beautiful, terrible, and perfectly just idea. Phil, ever the polite colleague, finally turned to me. "Hank, this is my friend, Rocky Moose. I think you two may have met." I extended my hand, and a slow smile spread across my face. "Yes. Hello, Hank. A pleasure to see you again." He took my hand, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. "My wife and I continued, my voice steady and clear. "We were your tenants a few years ago. On street, the software developer, saving up to buy a house? Well, this is where I work, here, with Phil." I watched his face as the pieces clicked into place. The vague recognition hardened into full-blown memory. The confident posture faltered. Just for a second, he remembered. Oh, he remembered. "Yes, of course," he said, forcing a tight, unpleasant smile. "How are you doing?" "Oh, we're just fine," I said cheerfully. "Thanks for asking. So, Phil tells me you're his real estate agent. What a small world." He nodded, the pleasantry strained. He wanted to leave. He knew this was bad, but I wasn't done. I did some quick, loud, back-of-the-napkin math. This was the mid-2000s, a booming housing market, an agent's dream. "So, Phil," I said, looking at my friend but speaking directly to Hank, "you're selling the condo for what? Around $200,000, and you're looking at houses in the $500,000 range? So that's about $700,000 in total transactions. An agent usually gets 3% on both the sale and the purchase, right? That's, what, around 20 grand in commission. That's a nice payday for an agent, isn't it?" Hank's eyes flashed. The mask was gone. He knew exactly who I was now, and he knew exactly what I was doing. The silence that followed was thick, uncomfortable, and absolutely delicious. Phil looked at me, completely baffled by my sudden passive aggression. Hank deflected, mumbling something about commissions being complicated. He quickly told Phil to send back the papers, shook his hand, gave me a stiff, terrified nod, and practically fled for the door. As he was leaving, I called out after him, my voice dripping with false sincerity. "It was really good to see you again, Hank." The moment the door clicked shut behind him, I turned to Phil before he could even ask. I said, loudly enough for Hank to potentially still hear, "Phil, don't sign a single thing. I have a story to tell you." Phil stared at me, his expression a mix of anger and confusion. "Rocky, what the hell was that?" And so I told him. I told him everything. The dink plan, the condescending remarks about my salary, the 50% rent hike, the stolen security deposit, and the final, infuriating words, "You don't have to like it. You just have to pay it." Phil, being the genuinely good person he is, listened intently. He was shocked. "I've always known Hank as a straightforward guy," he said, shaking his head. "But I can totally see him doing that to you. Man, what a dick. There's no way I can use him now." And then, a wicked grin spread across Phil's face. "So," he said, his eyes lighting up, "what do you want me to say when I fire him?" It was in that moment I knew Phil was a true friend. We huddled together like school kids, crafting the perfect script for the phone call. My only regret in this entire story is that I couldn't see the look on Hank's face when Phil made the call the next day. But I was standing right behind him, listening on speakerphone, and it was glorious. "Hi, Hank. It's Phil," he began. "Yeah, about the paperwork. I've decided I'm going to get some quotes from other agents. I'm not going to be signing up with you." No, you shouldn't offer a discount," Phil said, his voice laced with mock sincerity. "You'd be losing money if you did that. No, this is just a business decision I've made. No, it has nothing to do with Rocky Moose." "Well," Phil said, delivering the killer blow with utter calm, "you don't have to like it, Hank. You just have to accept it. Goodbye." Click. The silence in the office was broken by our triumphant laughter. It was the most perfect, most poetic revenge I could have ever imagined. Through a one-in-a-million chance encounter, a moment of greed and disrespect years ago had come back to cost him $20,000 in easy money. And the best part? He absolutely knew it had everything to do with Rocky Moose. It's funny how life works. For 5 years, I carried that small, bitter seed of injustice. Hank likely never thought of me again. But a single act of petty greed, a moment of punching down on someone you think is powerless, can have consequences that ripple out in ways you can never predict. He taught me a valuable lesson that day. You don't have to like it. You just have to pay it. It turns out that lesson applied to him too. What's the most satisfying revenge you've ever witnessed or been a part of? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of karmic justice, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next story. Until next time, remember to be kind. You never know who you'll be dealing with 5 years from now.